I am so delighted to introduce Ryan Carter and Matthew Harvey, who are all the way in the Barn Theatre right now, live. Yeah, we are here to chat a bit more about Now or Never. So we mentioned a little bit, we heard from Ryan earlier in our show, just a little bit about the show, a bit about the logistics and where the idea came from. But we thought we didn't have enough time. So let's introduce and talk a bit more about the show, and yeah, let everyone know about it. So hi, Ryan. Hi, Matt or Matthew? What would you prefer?
Let's go with Matt.
Let's go with Matt.
Cool.
Amazing. But how are you doing? How's your day been so far?
Good. Good. We're at the barn. We're doing lots of bits. It's the first time you've come up since we've started building the sets and the spaces.
Yeah, we've had Zooms where Ryan's been carrying around an iPad being now this is here, this is here, this is here. But seeing it all sort of for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, this is really happening. Which is really exciting. And we're sort of the one take thing where we're just sort of walking around the barn for the whole show is sort of on paper, I was like, that just can't work, surely. But now sort of being here and seeing it is tremendously exciting to sort of see it all,
It's still very much madness.
As it always is. Any show leading up to an opening night, you're going to have a bit of madness. I don't think theatre would be the way it is without that madness.
Absolutely not. I mean, can you talk us through a bit about the piece, what the piece is about? Obviously, I know you can't give away the spoilers and things like that, but you mentioned that it's a one shot. But what is this piece of work?
So I've known Yuan for years. I did my first job with him, which was actually his last job as an actor, which means he loved working with me so much.
What did you do?
Well, I know. So I came up to see Marry Me a Little last year, sort of between lockdowns, and throughout the first lockdown, I decided I wanted to write some theatre. So I played him a few demos that I had for a different project, and he was like, "This is great. Do you want to write something for the barn for around this time of the year?" And I said, "Yeah." He went, "Great. I'll see you in February." And that was sort of his only sort of guidance, was if it can be kind of about lockdown and situation, but not so on the nose that it's COVID the musical. What do they call it? Corona Cabana. Free real estate for anyone who wants to make that. So on the train back, I kind of thought, right, what could be about this? And I really wanted to write something happy and with a very positive message, because I think this sort of little, events here and there and that have been happening within the theatre community have been tremendously impactful for a lot of us who just feel we're sort of very ostracized, I think, at the moment, in terms of the whole industry just having to grind to a halt. So I wanted to write something happy that was themed around, catastrophe, and this seemed, like a nice way to do it. And originally we were going to film it all on separate days, so we didn't have to have any actors in the same place as a sort of film. But then the people would be singing here in the studio, but also acting in a pre-recorded thing. And then Ryan came on board and sort of was like, well, what if we did it sort of a bit like a Birdman style? We could do it in one take and maybe cut away for one song to give us a chance to reset and stuff, and then we can also throw in a couple of pre-record bits. And then every time I would zoom Ryan, there'd be one less camera. And suddenly he was like, "Do you know what? I think we should just do the entire thing in one single take." And that's sort of how we ended up here. And we've got this lovely space. If you've not been down to the barn, you must come. It's outrageously beautiful and so versatile that we've been able to make 7 different locations within the theatre that all kind of function as performance spaces.
Can you just flesh out a bit more? I mean, I'm fascinated to know about the technical demands and a bit more about how you have fleshed out those different spaces, because I know like that you can achieve that because you're amazing. But how have you done it?
So I obviously left them with the task of making it logistically happen. So whether this is still how it works is up for debate. But from what I understand, we've got a big camera with basically a huge antenna. And the spaces we're using, basically, the connection won't drop between rooms. So part of my job was making sure that the route that we're going to have the cameraman take wouldn't take him too far away from like the central equipment. But luckily at the barn, weirdly, the stage is actually the center of the building. There's like offices on one side, things upstairs, and then things on the other side. So using the stage as like the hub for all of the tech means that we can actually have a full circumference of the entire building, which is quite nice. But yeah, we've got, one of the challenges is that if we were going to do this, we'd have to do it live.
Well, that's right, because initially I said, well, look, let's pre-record it and let's have people mime along to pre-recorded vocals, and that way nothing can go wrong. Yeah, right.
I said, nah.
Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I just think like all of the extra cameras and like having pre-record, like that was effectively like a contingency and like safety. And what I like about our approach to it is that it's as risky for us as it is for the audience in a way. It's probably the closest to like an actual live experience that I've done digitally. In that, you know, we're gonna have a beginner's call and like the audience see it at the same time that I see it, even though like I'm in the room. Like, it's really weird, but it's exciting. And with it being a piece of new work, one of the reasons I approached it like this is because I think, like Matt said, it was originally going to be like a mini series that was shot like filmically. But I think with digital work, I think we lose the workshop stages because it's easy to put it out straight away. So it's like, okay, well, why would you have versions of it if you can actually get to the final result quicker? And I was keen to make sure that we still presented this in a way that the audience knew that this is the first version of it. Like, when the audience get invested, they're going to get invested in the future of the project, not just the one event. So I think you know, lowering the production value slightly with regards to like set and dressing, but actually making it more ambitious digitally and like with the team that are attached to it, I think will let the audience know that this is very much like the first stage of like what I think is going to be a huge hit. Yeah, no pressure.
For me, it really reminded me one of the first pieces of digital work that actually is going to remind me of an actual stage show or a theatre show where you have that feeling of it being a one-time experience, which you kind of lose from the National Theatre. Did it a bit when they were only streaming it to cinemas, their work, and you had to buy a ticket, and it still felt like a community thing. But then they've obviously gone out and had to branch out because of COVID, and people can watch things again and again. But this brings us back to that and those feelings of it being a one-time experience. How has it been? Kind of, I'd love to know a bit more about how your process has slightly changed, Matt, with knowing that it's now developed into a one-shot thing. Has it changed any slightly throughout the journey, or has it been quite similar?
Yeah, I think I ended sort of last year with a big folder full of demos of what this kind of could be, and that was sort of what we were working from. And now knowing that we've got to link these spaces together, there's some sort of additional material that's going to take place to link some of these areas, and without sort of giving too much away, kind of giving more kind of context about the piece. But it was important that it didn't just feel like 7 random songs and now we're going to walk from one place to the other. So they're all connected by this theme, and there's a musical motif that happens in every song, so that by the time we reach the last song, I really want the audience to feel like they're very familiar with it. So yeah, it changed the way I approached it. I think in terms of musically, we've got an amazing band that have come together out of nowhere this week. Freddie Tapner, who runs the LMTO, was like, yeah, here's the best players I know. And they've done this week. Yeah. So I just got literally on my way here sent a Dropbox with like tracks to listen to. So we've had sort of, Monday we had drums recording, Tuesday bass recorded, Wednesday piano, and then Friday we had violin, cello, and sort of it's just been like building blocks of music. But we factored that in, saying, well, can we make these bars loopable? So if we need to go from one space to the other, we have underscore, and even sort of, changing keys of a couple of songs so that they go into each other nicely, that sort of thing, because we do want it to feel really cohesive, and that it is one thing. It's going to be one track that gets played essentially for the whole show.
So I'd love to know a little bit more about what you now got from today to the opening night. What have you now logistically got to do is getting the actors in and rehearsing that and Just, I don't want to put pressure on you, but what have you got to do?
We've got, basically, we have, the actors are incredible. The cast we've got are insane and true professionals. So we actually don't have them in the space with us until the day.
Wow.
Because of COVID guidelines and also the way it's structured, and also with everyone having their own set, it also works with restrictions because, you know, there's never more than that many people in the room. What we need to do as a team is rehearse a show so many times logistically with the tech and the camera movements and stuff, so that adding the actors doesn't phase anyone. So for the next 3 days, we're basically just going to be rehearsing it within an inch of its life. And like Matt said, we need to like make sure we time the transitions between spaces and make sure that the track is long enough to do that. Probably add a couple of bars for contingency in case like something does go wrong slightly and a route does take longer than we prep it to. We basically need to be more familiar with it than the actors, which, because also it's not like we've got like a book to go off. It's not like someone's calling the show. We're all following the camera as it goes around the building. So we need to know the music as well as the actors do. We need to know the spaces as well as the stagehands do. Like, it's going to be a long 3 days.
Has it been like this for you throughout the lockdown? Because talking to you now, it's very much, you know, we're talking to almost as if things are back to normal-ish with, you know, some changes here and there and that. But what's it been like for you throughout lockdown? Have you been working like this throughout, or were there periods where you weren't able to, you couldn't do anything?
You've been busy the whole time, pretty much, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, my journey was slightly different in that I've been passionate about like digital theatre since 2000, since I graduated. So like I've almost been set up so that when everyone was like, oh, we need to like somehow make musical theatre digital, I was like, oh, I've got a bunch of experience and like this is weirdly what my passion project is. But the stuff which, I mean, to be fair, when the first lockdown happened, I wasn't doing anything. I had a gig at Leicester Curve lined up like as a performer, so I wasn't actively like trying to find work or anything. The first thing I did was because of the Black Lives Matter protests. So that was where I jumped back into creating, and then everything else came off the back of that. But it's not like I actually probably wouldn't have been doing any of this stuff if it wasn't for the movement. Would I? Probably eventually.
What was it about Black Lives Matter that spurred your creativity on?
It was the fact that we were in lockdown. The industry wanted to do some kind of work to stand in solidarity with it. And also, you know, the industry was imploring everyone with experience to like educate their peers. So someone came to me and was like, I want to do a Black Lives Matter event, but it would have to be done digitally and it would have to be done in a COVID secure way. And I was like, oh, I think I know how we would do that. So then I basically designed the show with the team. And it was the first lockdown concert to have been shot in a venue.
Wow.
This was in like July. I think before that it was all very much like living room concerts and like Zoom concerts, which are great, but like it was the first time we were allowed to be in a space together, which I think then set a bit of a precedent for the future concerts and stuff that happened after that. But yeah, I mean, that was my first digital project as like a creative director of a digital medium, and then I came up to the barn as a performer, and then
here we are.
Got stuck.
got stuck in the best possible way.
The work they do here is really cool, and like I said to you, like on the radio this morning, I could happily pitch like a one-shot thing that uses 7 different spaces, which would need to go out live. Like there was no question whether I needed to work that out before I pitched it, which as a creative director, it's quite nice for me to be able to pitch it knowing that if I needed them to make it work, they would, rather than with other companies where I've had to like actually logistically make sure I could make it work first to then convince the team to be able to do it. Whereas like here, I can just go, I want to do this. It always starts with a Zoom, going like, yeah, I think we should do a one shot and I think it should be live. And I think we should cut all the other B cameras because we had B cameras as a contingency. And then I was watching some one shot stuff and I was like, as soon as you cut away from the one shot, there's no point doing a one shot.
Yeah.
So then I was like, yeah, we're going to cut them. And I told every person involved in the project, I think I told them at a different time that I'd cut the B cams. So like one guy, I think I actually only told yesterday. He was like, I'm wearing the B cams for this room. And I was like, oh, I'll cut them. Yeah.
Gone.
And he was like, then what do we cut to if we need to cut away? And I was like, we don't.
The stress dreams I've had of Ben stacking it with the camera are just numerous.
Has he got stairs to contend with?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he does. I have actually just taken away one set of stairs.
So there's nothing there?
No.
It's been full.
I moved one route. Basically, one of the stairs was like too steep, and they were like,
Yeah.
"This is really ambitious," and I was like, "Yeah, okay."
But the gear they have here, considering this is a theatre, the production equipment they have is mind blowing. The cameras and the sort of steady rigs and everything they have, it's gonna look great. And I think Ryan's so right that there's never a question of like, can we pull this off? Because I was so tentative to be like, yeah, let's do this, because I was listening, oh, what you know, I've tried to produce videos and music and stuff, you know, personally, and when you have to do all of that yourself, you just meet every single problem and you go, oh no. But Ryan was so confident in that, yeah, we can pull this off, it's absolutely fine. And we're not going to mind anything. We're not going to need a B cam. We have the tech and the team that are capable of doing this. It's going to be fine. So it's very exciting to see so many people who are so sort of passionate about their specific part in this production.
I suppose that's what allows each individual to really flourish and just focus on their one thing. They can be as creative as they need to be. You can just focus on making the show as best as it can. You've got the people who's designated for just the camera to make sure it's going to look and be lit right and all of that sort of stuff. So what's the kind of future? So this is the premiere of the piece. What's the future of it after the first?
Well, I've got 3 or 4 more songs I want to write that I wanted to sort of have the first half of be, you know, these individual people, and then I'd like them to sort of meet and interact with each other. And because I love writing duets or sort of, you know, not typical romantic duets. I like writing stuff that's about something else. So I'd love to kind of see that happen and develop it into sort of a full length song cycle. And we talk about what could happen with it next all the time. And I'd love to see it performed in a theatre as a run, because I think, especially when people hear the performers we have doing this material, I think it's going to really resonate, I think, because the performers are so good, and I think they deserve to be seen in their natural environment. But then equally, I could see us doing a fuller version of this in the same way, because I think, you know, we're kind of reaching the end of lockdown, where digital theatre is, you know, inevitable and sort of required from everyone. But I do think that there is a lot to be gained from continuing with it, even when traditional theatre opens up. And I think a show like this, where there's sort of limited interaction with the characters to start with, is such a good way to workshop this one-shot thing, which I think is, as Ryan said, the closest you kind of get to being part of a live experience. And I think the second you see a cut, you're then placing something at the same level as, you know, streaming something on Netflix and holding it to that standard. Whereas if you're watching it live, there's no cuts. You're seeing what the performers are doing. There's someone physically holding that camera that you're walking along with. I think it makes it a lot more immersive and you know, immediate.
I completely agree. I think you know, I'm really looking forward to the work that's going to continue post lockdown. What I hope happens is that everything that everybody's learned is then retained and just pushed into new work. Because what are your thoughts about when we open back up, for example, work then going back into theatres and a move away from digital? Because I really don't think that this was a temporary measure. For me, it's my perfect art form to consume as an audience. So it's my preference. What are your thoughts about that and work moving forward, digital theatre, etc.?
I think, I mean, if I speak, I scream, but I think live theatre is going to revert back to what the industry would classify as its like most successful model, which, in my opinion, is like the most problematic of models with regards to like elitism and exclusivity. And I think digital theatre is probably going to remain as the accessible form of art. And I think the people that prioritize having digital, I think a company that prioritizes having a digital element alongside a live piece are probably the ones to continue to support, because they're obviously the ones going, okay, live theatre is the primary format, but we acknowledge that it's easier to afford if it reaches a bigger audience. Like you can use different types of freelancers in it because it's a whole other form of like art form with people's different experience and stuff. Those venues are the ones that I think we should continue to support. And I think as soon as a venue that has been doing digital work in the last 6 months, primarily because it's the only thing they could do, if they drop it as an art form, I think, drop them.
It's a real shame, I think. And for me, one of the best parts about my favourite part of the pandemic, odd thing to say, being that I've actually probably watched more theatre than I ever did when I lived in London, because there is so much of it. And if you know someone who's in a show, you think, oh my God, fantastic, well, great, that's my Thursday night sorted. Don't need to do a Zoom quiz now. And that there's so many smaller theatres like the Barn or the Hope Mill, for example, that I've not been able to get up and see a show there, but was able to, come and see a show and feel like I was experiencing that. So I think there's been amazing innovation, largely due to necessity during the pandemic, but it's like there's a ball rolling. And I think we're only now reaching the point where people are starting to be more and more innovative with their digital stuff, so that if something go, oh, thank God we can open again, that you're automatically going to be competing with, as Ryan said, the number one tours that have made the most margin, and because the industry just is going to need some sudden revenue, and they're not going to be taking chances on new composers, for example. That would be a terrible business decision to go, I know, let's do a new musical now that we're in desperate need of money.
I mean, if when everything opens back up and I start looking through programs, as I do quite often, and I see what I saw before, just to flip back, Ryan, to talking about digital theatre driving inclusivity. I understand they need revenue. We know that, but we can't have programs filled with the standard white males, white people in general. Actually, there's some programs I've looked through, and it's just been show to show, just white people all the way through. And this is kind of the answer. Digital theatre, I feel, is the answer. There's a solution here to the problem that the industry has with exclusivity. Maybe even with audience as well. A lot of theatre is geared towards particular audience types, and we have here a solution. So if it does go away, I'll be highly kind of confused. That would be slightly absurd. I'm fascinated. I freelance as a web developer, right? So I do loads of coding stuff, but I don't tend to do loads of creative stuff. So for me as an audience member, as I said, I'm like, this is what I want to be consuming. I'm like, if this goes away, it's actually really hard for me to now go to the theatre, to be honest, particularly when I've looked through the programs and encountered things like that. I'd much rather take in a diverse piece of work that's touching different cultures online than kind of do that. I don't know, Nick, how do you feel as a director about that?
I think you're totally right in that digital theatre being such an accessible form for people, that essentially it's, if you've got an internet connection, which majority of people do, you'd be able to access something like this. And there's ways of, if you can't afford tickets, it's more feasible for a theatre to be able to give free tickets away, because you're not having to fill a seat and then all of that sort of stuff, that you can have reached such a wider audience. And I don't think it will go away, and I don't think it can, because of people like yourself and the Barn in general, who've put an infrastructure within their organization that this is a central and a key part to it. And that's happening at other organizations as well. And I just hope more and more theatres, more traditional theatres that are just like kind of proscenium march sort of theatres, just push that as well. And I think when we get more audiences in, and that the income and the of the venue can start to increase again, they can even push more into that. And I'm just in awe of the Barn and what you guys do. It's a privilege to have worked there, and I just love that what you're doing. And this show sounds fantastic. And so I like that there's a positive take on the pandemic within this. And it really excited to watch it. I can't wait.
I mean, I've got loads of things I want to say, but I don't know if I can. I'm going to need another session to. No, I think I summed it up in my last point. Well, I completely echo your points, Nick. I mean, what are the plans moving forward for the Barn and more digital work? Or can you not reveal them? I don't want specifics, but just like
I'm basically going to lock myself in here after the show until I get to work on another project with them, because they've been just a dream to work with. And on paper I've written nothing, so to take a chance, I think, on a new writer for something like this, is huge. And I've been sort of privy to a couple of discussions about the plans they have for future work, and it's I think it only goes up from here really for the barn in terms of digital content.
Yeah, I think all of the new avenues that the barn have taken because of the pandemic, be it digital work or like the Barn Fest that they did last year, I think I can tell you that we're not going to continue any of them. So like, as we reopen live theatre, yes, we're going to reopen the theatre, and the work that we've got programmed is some of my favourite stuff that we've ever worked on. But then, you know, the balls that we've thrown in the air with regards to the other stuff, like we're going to continue to invest in those. It's really like, it's going to be a really exciting few months. I think personally getting January to March was like us trying to make sure that we were still creating work. So I think that lockdown announcement in December is what really messed up like a lot of theatres, because they had programs that
was a real kick in
the teeth. It was a real struggle, that one. So I personally was like, let's just get to March. As soon as we've got there, we'll be fine. And now that we're at April and we're looking forward, it's like I can almost relax a little bit. And then just get creative and like just start reading all the new work. And, you know, I'm really excited. We're going to have a really exciting few months for sure.
I'm excited too. I suppose we nearly coming to a close, but one of the things that Nick and I have been discussing on air, off air, on social media, off social media,
all the time,
is how we can be better allies. And I wanted to ask your advice on this. We've reached out to lots of different people. I feel like we've kind of made our position clear that we are two people in a position of learning, recognize our privilege. But what is your take on allyship in the industry, and what can people be doing to be better allies?
I think one of the things our industry do is like performative allyship, which is kind of problematic in that it seems fake and seems very much like as virtue signaling just for social media. And I think as a queer person of colour, I definitely recognise when the allyship is legit. So like, if people are questioning the optics of allyship, I think that they've already made a mistake personally, because it's not about what it looks like, it's about, you know, the people you're trying to support. With the industry as a whole and like the infrastructure and the systemic issues, a lot of that I think won't change until you start inviting minority groups to the table where you're discussing this stuff in the first place. I think there's a lot of, I actually read a Stage article where they were talking about how a lot of schemes are for emerging talent or for like convincing people of colour to go to drama schools in the first place. And that's actually not where the issue's ever been. The issue has been that when those people graduate, there's nowhere for them to go. And I think what I'm trying to do a lot of is convince organisations to like employ people of colour when you start talking about the project from the off, not when you realise that you've ended up with a white programme. I mean,
that's just
I recognise, like, I recognise that you two like have it correct. I probably wouldn't have done the show again if I didn't. If I got wind that like it was a problem. I think being open to discuss it at all times is like part of it, and not when it's fashionable. Because I mean, it's probably not fashionable anymore. It was 6 months ago for everyone to be talking about it. My inbox was blowing up with people asking me to make appearances, unpaid appearances, on all of their shows, to discuss it. But you know, now it's died down, and now, like when we talk about live theatre reopening again, if the work that people have been claiming to do needs to be seen, this is where we see it reflected.
I saw a lovely quote actually from Maisie Borden, who I adore, on Twitter, saying if your activism stops at social media, then it's not really activism. It's just, you know, saying good stuff, but then it has to sort of come into the rest of your professional career, I think. And I think sometimes, as you know, as a straight white male, exactly, you know, you sometimes I think people are remiss to talk about it and to have a dialogue and say like, is this problematic? Is this not? Because you're like, oh God, what if I am unconsciously contributing to the problem? And that stops the discussion from happening.
I understand, and I've felt that many times when I'm aware that I am unconsciously behaving in ways, definitely, and that's a hard thing to work on. It's a hard thing to recognise, but Yeah, I completely agree. I think I chatted to my friend the other day. She was talking about how it shouldn't take events to happen for people to react to them. That's
Right.
We should be doing this from the off. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that.
I read a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell that like changed my whole life with regards to subconscious bias. So I highly recommend to anyone. Because I grew up with, I mean, this is like a podcast for another day, but I grew up with subconscious bias against Black people because of where I was raised and not how I was raised, but, you know, I grew up in a white area with my mum, who's white. So the only time I saw people of color was in the media. And, you know, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't particularly healthy. It was all very stereotype based, and, you know, we were always the villains and always aggressive. And so I basically, up until I was like 15, 16, had subconscious bias against Black people. So then when I read this book and had a bias test, I was like, well, if I'm literally mixed race, like I'm literally the product of like 50-50, and if I can still be biased, then everyone is. Like, everyone must have some kind of bias. And I think the issue with our industry is that we're in charge of like deciding what people see. So like, I think it's really important that we are neutral, or we are consciously making sure we do the work, because we're shaping representation for future generations. And it just perpetuates, doesn't it? Unless you fix it. Got to nip it in the buds.
In the bud. Well, I do work outside of the arts sector quite a lot, and it's fascinating to see how far behind other sectors are and how much work. So the arts is, as far as I see, it's really driving it in sector, but it's having such a huge impact outside as well. And we really have miles and miles to go. I won't go into, as you said, Ryan, podcast for another time. Yeah, but thank you for that. That was great. And Ryan, can you just repeat the book again, just one more time?
Yeah, it's called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. He's a genius. All of his stuff is great, but he does a lot of writing about underdogs and like the way your brain works and rewiring your like instincts and stuff. So it talks a lot about subconscious bias.
Subconscious bias.
Thank you.
Well, I guess the final thing we should quickly chat about is just when is it happening and where can people buy tickets for your show? Just move back to Now or Never, just quickly.
Do you know? It's I do. It's happening at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 1st of April. It's not April Fool's. Please do tune in. Imagine if it is. If you're like, Matt, we actually pranked you. There's no show. And you can get tickets on the Barn website. And please do support what I hope will be the first of many productions of it.
It's new British work, and it's the epitome of like a regional theatre, a really lovely regional theatre doing some really lovely work. So I'm really proud of it.
And I hope it will make people smile. I think hearts need to be warmed at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I really can't wait to watch it myself. It's going to be great.
I'm buzzing.
Yeah.
And we've got tickets to give away. Thank you for that as well.
Really we're excited for that.
People are loving that. But yeah, no, thank you so much. And I'd love to catch up again. So I feel like we could just have 8-hour conversation. It's tough.
You're good. Just come round.
When we can, yeah.
We're not too far away.
Definitely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us for longer than I think you've got time to do. You've got a lot to crack on with. So thank you so much. And we will chat again, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us, guys.
We love you.
Love you.
Love you.